remains closed, which means key cargo deliveries are scrambled here on the East Coast. That cargo that could include the car that you've been thinking about test driving, or even the sugar that you put in your coffee each morning. Maryland's governor says that the U.S. economy depends on reopening this port ASAP, but it can't reopen until the collapsed bridge and the ship stuck underneath it are removed from the water. And let's get straight to the source tonight with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who met today with officials from ports and labor groups to talk about these supply chain concerns. Secretary, thank you for your time tonight. Obviously, you know how vital this port is to national supply chains, which has been a big concern for everyone. Do you have a better idea tonight of how soon that port could reopen?
It's too soon to say exactly how long it will be to clear the channel. That's going to depend on assessments by the Army Corps of Engineers and others as they work to understand the extent of the debris that's in there. What I do know is that there are 3 heavy lift vessels on their way in. The first of them should arrive tomorrow. What we were able to learn today when I gathered about 100 players from across supply chains is what to expect until that port can be reopened, which of course we're seeking to have happen as soon as possible. But we know it's not going to be overnight. And in the meantime, there are going to be some real impacts. This is a significant container port, around 10th in the U.S., depending how you count it. The good news is containers can be accommodated at a lot of other ports up and down the eastern seaboard. It is specialized, though, in vehicles. It's actually the biggest vehicle handling port in the U.S., as well as certain other bulk products like sugar. So there's a lot of coordination going on right now. That's part of what we were working to help support today when we brought these players together. You got shippers, terminal operators, ports, cargo owners, even the rail and the trucking sector getting involved because some of their plans have to change, all to figure out how to accommodate, reroute, and plan for what's next.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, not knowing when this is going to reopen. It has people who are sitting at home wondering how it could affect them and impact their lives. And the cars obviously has been a big impact of that. I mean, do you have an estimate of the cost of that impact and just how many Americans it could end up affecting?
Well, of course, the longer the disruptions go on, the more you can see them cause some of these economic distortions. Although so far there have not been indications that it's going to be in the proportions of what we saw a few years ago on the West Coast, for example. Many of the ships that call on Baltimore already also call on other ports up and down the East Coast, and those ports are already gearing up to try to temporarily accommodate that extra traffic. For example, the Port of New York and New Jersey, they indicated they have about 20% more capacity than they're using right now. So again, for those temporary changes, they should be pretty well positioned to absorb that. We just need to make sure that whether it's vehicles or other bulk products, that there are plans for things that are a little more specialized. Now, the other thing we're really concerned about right now is, of course, the workers on those ports. These workers have been through so much from COVID to more recent disruptions. They need the cargo to be moving in order for them to have an income. There's a lot of work going on right now, including with the State Department of Labor under the leadership of Governor Wes Moore, my colleague Julie Su at the U.S. Department of Labor, just another part of the whole of government effort to support everybody who has been impacted by this tragedy.
Yeah, we saw Governor Moore with the hotline earlier for those workers. The federal government, for its part, has just provided Maryland with $60 million in emergency funds, an announcement that you made earlier. Do you have a better estimate tonight as you're looking at this of really what the whole price tag for the recovery and rebuilding is going to be?
What I can tell you is this $60 million is helpful, but it's really a down payment. And that's exactly part of what they're working to get more information on right now. There are some expenses that are being incurred right away. That's why we made sure to process this emergency relief request within hours of when it came in formally to our department. Those $60 million can be used for things like demolition, debris removal, even detours, some of the costs associated with setting up the detours associated with the traffic disruption, as well as things related to to the design and the construction and ultimately reconstruction of the bridge. But look, this is not going to be a small project by any stretch. And we know that it's going to be costly, but we also know that cost is worth it to get Baltimore back on its feet, to get everything back to normal, and to support our traffic systems and supply chains. And my hope is that this will continue to be something that enjoys bipartisan support, and it certainly enjoys the full-throated support of the President of the United States, as he pledged very soon after this tragedy was known.
Yeah, I know we've heard from some Republicans talking about offsetting and having spending cuts to offset that cost. We'll see what that looks like with Congress. But, Mr. Secretary, I have to ask you about something that I guess we shouldn't be surprised by anymore, but almost immediately after this ship hit this bridge and the bridge collapsed, there were these wild conspiracy theories about what really happened. I mean, they ranged from a cyber attack to the captain having side effects from the COVID vaccine. They even blamed the Obamas at one point. And I just wonder, as a sitting cabinet secretary, if you ever thought that you'd have to combat something like that when dealing with a crisis.
You know, we're in the business of dealing with roads and bridges and sometimes ships and trains. We are not in the habit as a Department of Transportation of being in the business of dealing with conspiracies or conspiracy theories or that kind of wild thinking. But unfortunately, it is a fact of life in America today. What's really upsetting, of course, is that when misinformation or disinformation circulates, that is not without victims. Remember, this is a human tragedy. 6 people lost their lives, and everybody from dock workers to commuters in Baltimore is wanting and needing good information about how this is going to impact them. And we as a department need good factual information about how this happened so that we can include that in future decisions on everything from maritime and shipping policy to bridge design for the 2030s and 2040s. All of that requires being grounded in fact. And that's what we're doing. That's why I admire and respect the independent work of the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, which is really just ignoring all of the speculation, rumor, and misinformation, making sure that we have a completely factual base of information to use as a country, to use as a government, to guide better decisions, and get to the bottom of every piece of how this could have happened.
Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thank you for your time tonight.